This week I'm going to test the Zeiss Batis 25mm f2 against the Sony 24mm f1.4 GM with Astrophotography, and there are downloadable images in the description below so you can do all of the pixel peeping you want to. I've been wanting to do this test for a while, but haven't been able to get my hands on the 24mm f1.4 up until now. I also wanted to wait for the Milky Way season to start so I could get a few different shots with both lenses. Now I've had the 25mm Batis for a few years and I love it. It's a fantastic lens and I've taken some of my favourite shots with it. I'm even filming with it now, so I do use it on a daily basis. It has a very minimalistic look and is very much a fly-by-wire lens. To get focus at night, it is really easy, and for my copy, the infinity point is just before this display on the back turns to the infinity logo. You also have the display on the top, but I prefer the accuracy of the display on the back, as I can see what's going on with my image, I can see what stars are in focus and how much they are in focus, and I get the scale on the back telling me exactly where the focus point is. And it's never really let me down. Now for the 24mm 1.4, I'm not going to lie, the extra few clicks down to f1.4 do give you more light and make it a very tempting lens. This is basically one more stop, which is double the amount of light. But does it suffer from any Coma aberrations? Well, keep watching to find out. It has the aperture dial on the lens and I thought this would be a really nice feature. But as I have the aperture set to my front dial just below the shutter button, when it isn't set to A, which is auto, which basically means it's controlled by the camera, and it's set on a number, you can't control it with your dial on your camera. And this was a bit annoying as all of my other lenses are controlled through the camera. So I'm used to going to this front dial and changing my aperture. I found that I did knock it a couple of times and then I was wondering why the aperture dial had stopped working. And it was because I'd inadvertently knocked it out of A and onto a number. This is a little bit frustrating and it does take a bit of getting used to. Once again, this lens also is fly-by-wire, so the focusing dial is an electronic connection and it's not a mechanical or manual focusing system. It is okay, and once you get the feel of it, it does give you control over your focusing. I'm not really a fan of electronic focus lenses for manual focusing at night, but these are the times we live in, and these are the lenses we have for Sony cameras that work for both astro as well as landscape and other forms of photography. So I've learned to live with it. The Batis is 335 grams and 8.1 by 8.1 by 9.2 centimeters. The Sony is 445 grams and 9 by 8 by 10 centimeters. So the Sony is slightly bigger and slightly heavier, but only by a fraction. And to be honest, you probably won't notice the difference. Now the price is where there is quite a bit of difference. As I film this, the Batis comes in at $950, where the 24mm Sony is $1,398. I actually picked up my Batis for around about $600 secondhand, which was such a good deal. So if you keep an eye out on the secondhand market, sometimes you can get an absolute bargain. So here are the test images. Remember, you can download these to look at them on your own system in your own time. The link is in the description below. These were taken at a Bortle Class 3 location with a little bit of light pollution on the horizon, but you can still see plenty of stars. There is a lot of dust in the air on that horizon, but I also took a shot looking straight up to show the differences when you have a frame filled with stars. These first few were taken with both lenses at f2, just to compare that f2 level. And then I opened up the aperture of the Sony to f1.4. You can see that that extra stop of light really helps at night in soaking up the small amount of light that is about. So when you import them both into Lightroom, it will automatically put on the lens corrections. So when you turn this off, you can see quite a difference between the two shots. The Batis does have a bit more distortion and vignetting, but it's not too bad at all. And this is wide open at f2. The Sony has less of both, which is to be expected as it's the more expensive lens. When you click on the lens corrections on the Batis, it doesn't look bad at all, and the Sony looks really good. I'd say, comparing the two, the Sony is the winner when it comes to this. With Coma aberrations, both lenses do really well. Although right at the edges, the Sony seems to have some slight coma aberrations, especially in the corners, but only a small amount at f2. Now when you open it out to f1.4, it does show a little more. Now this is pixel peeping, but you can see a difference when zoomed in 1:1 between the Batis and the Sony. This is the Batis, and this is the Sony. However, when you look at the image as a whole, it's a lot harder to see these aberrations, and most people looking at your photos wouldn't notice them anyway. Just as a comparison, here is a shot from the Canon 1.4 50mm, which has awful coma aberrations at 1.4. This is just a comparison and to show you that the Sony only really has a slight bit of coma aberrations. But for me, the Batis wins with this. At 24mm, the Sony is slightly wider, but it's hardly noticeable, and if you didn't have these side by side, you probably wouldn't notice the difference. When switching between the two, the Batis does really show that distortion a little more than the Sony, but we've already covered that. With the aperture at f1.4, the Sony wins this hands down, and that's one whole stop of light brighter than the Batis. When you look at these two shots side by side, you can really see the difference between f2 and f1.4. So the Sony will let in more light and give you more detail. However, with those slight coma aberrations, you may want to drop it down to f.2 to lessen them. So in that respect, it brings it back to the same level as the Batis. But if you're okay with these, the f1.4 aperture definitely helps at night. When it comes to editing the images, both lenses rendered the colors well, although the vignette on the Batis was more obvious, whereas the Sony looks more even. It was straightforward to get them both looking good and to make the Milky Way pop. All in all, both of these lenses are really good and they can produce some fantastic images of the night skies. I've always been happy with my Batis, and I was pleased to see the Sony producing some great images of the night sky as well. Also, I know a few of you have this lens, and I've seen some of your fantastic shots of the night skies as well. So I know the Sony f1.4 GM is really good for astro. Now it might seem that I'm picking on this lens a little bit for those slight bits of coma aberration in the corners, but at almost $1,400, these should have been addressed when designing this lens. Now before doing this test, I was wondering if I would be convinced to switch to the Sony, but I'm happy with my Batis and I'm going to stick with it for now. If I was wanting to buy a fast wide angle around the 24mm mark and I didn't already have the Batis, this would be a hard choice. If I had to pay full price with a difference of $448, I'd probably save up and pay for the extra stop of light. But if I could find a second-hand Batis for a good price, I'd definitely go for that instead. Now have a look at the images available for download in the description and let me know what you think. Do you think the Sony is worth that extra money, or is the Batis the lens you'd go for? Let me know in the comments below because it would be great to hear your thoughts. If you want to learn more about photographing the stars, click on this tutorial here, and to learn about photo pills, click down here. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe for weekly tutorials in photography. I'll see you next time.